What up? All right, today two things we're going to go over. First half of the Uniquely Human book, and just reflecting on the first autism assessment session. Purpose of this is that I don't want to forget what it was like to go through this time, and I want to have a record of what I was thinking about and what was happening. Hey, check out the new intro thingy. I don't have a ton to say about the first session. It was basically this intake where you talk a lot about, I guess, like the history of your life and what you have trouble with, and it was just stressful because for me it's just talking about like total family abandonment. So I came home, and when I'm really stressed out I sleep on the floor a lot, so I came home from that session and I just curled up on the middle of the living room floor and put a blanket over myself and just slept there for hours. Just talking about it had been heavy and stressful. We did some, I guess, questionnaires, just like a big survey full of questions about all kinds of stuff. Yeah, I just don't want to forget that it affected me like that. Like I didn't feel very like upset by it, but I came home and I just sat down and curled up and just slept on the floor. Uniquely Human, Dr. Barry Prezant. So part one of this book is it's divided into two parts. Part one is understanding autism. So I'm going to go through just my reflections on each of these chapters, talk about what this stuff means to me. High level, this book is just describing the idea that autism is not an illness, but this is basically another kind of person to be. And it's talking about what autistic people's lives are like. In the introduction, I want to call out this thing that this kid, there's a autistic boy who his grandfather dies, and they're trying to explain to him what happens when you die, where you go. They tell him eventually, far off in the future, we're all gonna have to go, and then we'll be together, in the afterlife there. And what this kid Michael thought of, it struck me for two reasons. He thought about getting to heaven, and he asked if he was going to be able to stim there freely. And so he didn't think that when he got to heaven he would stop being autistic. He thought when he got to heaven he would be free. And that was one thing that struck me about it. The second thing was that I also had a thought like this when I was around that age, that when I got to the afterlife, I hoped there would be a big book filled with lists, because I wanted to know things like total number of sneezes sneezed in your lifetime, or total number of eyes blinks. And so I thought when I got there, I wouldn't be different. I would just finally get to see the book. That's what I really wanted. I wanted to see the lists in the book and know what the quantities were of all that stuff. Okay, so chapter 1 is stressing basically the idea that you need to ask why the people you're observing are doing the behaviors that they're doing. And he explains this in almost a multi-step format, where he's saying you observe what they're doing, you kind of describe what they're doing, and then you investigate its cause. And that strikes me as something that the people I've experienced life with don't think that way. And it's basically that they don't do the second half of what he's describing. So he's describing you kind of observe, describe, reason out why it might be occurring. But in my experience, it's a lot more like notice, react. And there's not even just a description phase. It's just the second you detect that, you are now in the clear to go nuts on this person. So my notes here say the reason I think they do that is because they see the source of all of the turmoil as, or they see the source of all issues as just coming from this inner autistic turmoil. There's just kind of this inner churn happening, and the emotion is just the result of this unending internal churn, and it doesn't have to do with anything in the room. We don't need to address anything. We don't need to talk to the person. We don't need to help them. We don't even need to validate these feelings. It's just that they kind of don't understand that their feelings are fake. And there's a word for that, in popular psychology. I think it's not the official way to use it, but the idea that No, it's not that you're wrong. I just need to explain to you why you're completely mistaken about everything you've apprehended here. It's just gaslighting, right? The idea that I just need to explain to you how you're completely mistaken about everything you think you perceived. But so to bring it back to the point of chapter 1 here, when people are thinking of asking why about autistic behaviors, they often don't think of the answer as being correlated to anything external. So the question appears resolved to them, and they don't feel like they must ask an additional why, because they think they've asked, why is this occurring? Oh, because of the endless internal churning of the turmoil of autism, and we're just seeing its exhaust releasing out the top, basically. And so it doesn't seem to them that there is even a why to continue towards. By the time we get to page 43, it's the second time he's mentioned how straight up disrespectful this treatment is. And I feel that very strongly, that when people are just incurious and uninterested about what's going on with you, they just want you to shut up now. Yeah, I obviously feel super disrespected by that. And when I tell people who are treating me that way, this is disrespectful to me, they just argue. They don't ever see that as a valid kind of encroachment on my, I don't know, not rights, but dignity as a person, I guess. They just don't see it that way. Chapter 2, I don't have many notes about. It's largely about the importance of family in supporting autistic people. Mine has not been supportive, so there's not a lot I relate to in that chapter, because for me it's just been a lot of, as soon as you're detected, you're in trouble, bro. Chapter 3, we're talking about ways that communication is disrupted by people who are trying to help autistic people. And they do this with communication. They also do this with interests. They kind of remove the ways that you connect with your environment and then act like, well, how come he isn't connecting to his environment? Because you took away what I used to do that, right? So if we're saying don't discuss your special interests around me, that was how I was reaching out to other people. So if you're saying do not use the tool that you use to reach out to other people, but I want you to reach out to other people anyway, I'm just going to ask you, then how? How am I supposed to go about that if the way that I go about that is not available to me and I have not been, like, an alternative has not been explained? It's just nothing. There's nothing here. They're telling you, okay, go. It's a cue moment with no context. We'll go to chapter 4. It's largely about trust and how we can violate the trust of autistic people without really understanding it, and that is very, very true. I have people who just won't acknowledge that what they've done hurt me or upset me. And it's just not important to them that part of it occurred. They did what they did, and how it affected people is no, that's not for them to address. But basically the point of chapter 4 is to say, when we support autistic people, the changes that we want to see in their behavior come about naturally. They come about just as a result of the person being comfortable in an environment where they're supported and not treated, and just never acknowledging that you violated that trust. Getting over it would be weird, right? To have your trust violated and then say, like, oh, the next day I just no longer felt that. Like, no, I know that person violated my trust, and the way that they just simply never want to talk about that because it would upset them more than how much they upset me to have to talk about it. But that when we're treating these people well, when we're treating them normally, the expectations that we have for their behavior are a lot easier to meet, or they're more reasonable. They're more reasonable expectations. Chapter 5. I guess it's just about what I took from this chapter was the idea that people are just not making the connections that you are. Right? So if you're saying, this pattern is apparent to me and it's upsetting, when you explain that pattern to someone, they don't say, oh, that's novel, I didn't notice that pattern, and now that you bring it to my attention, I see why it affects you. They just say, no, it isn't. And that's how, that flat, incurious no has just been such a problem in my life. So you feel, what I have in my notes is that you sometimes feel infected by places, and I feel that way kind of about my hometown in Connecticut, where when I'm there, just everything I'm seeing just kind of fills me up with a feeling of what it was like at a certain time, and I don't even feel like I'm connected to the current moment there, because I can only see how it used to feel. But the purpose of saying that is because that's what the experience is like for me, and because other people are just closed off to that idea, right? They just kind of say, no, it isn't. It's not like that. It is. Another way to phrase this is basically that a lot of what people assume is upsetting autistic people is basically idiopathic. It's just this unsourced, uncaused, big feeling. And because it's this sort of nonsense feeling, it's just on you to deal with. We don't have to help people like you, because people should have a... So this part's funny, because the people that I'm talking about don't have great emotional regulation skills, but they act like if you don't have like perfect emotional regulation skills, then basically whatever we want to do to you in retaliation is fine. You brought this on by communicating incorrectly, and now gloves are off. Yeah, so there's a lot of that just, well, if an autistic person is in distress, it's simply for no reason. That just happens to them. And you don't even need to treat it like it's happening. Like, don't even care or take it that seriously. Just basically wait it out until it gets quiet again and resume reading your magazine. And that's... Chapter 6 has this thing where they're talking about telepathy, and I vibe with this a little bit, and I also bristle at it a little bit. Because this kid is describing how it feels like neurotypicals all have telepathy and he just doesn't have it. And I vibe with that, because what I tell people is that, like, if I miss a social cue, it's not an issue of me failing to understand the logic of the situation. It's that I didn't feel an internal cue moment that everyone else did. Right? So there's this moment where you're going to feel now is the time to take action X. I don't feel that. And so because I can only retroactively notice that I've missed the cue, I can't notice that I didn't feel something, right? I can notice that I missed a cue after the fact. But that isn't addressed, right, by saying, hey, what if you noticed? Because what I will do is notice after your expectation's already been missed. So the constant repetition of like, well, the social interaction works this way. And I'm like, I know that. The problem is that I cannot feel this. I cannot feel the moment when I'm supposed to go out on the stage. And instead of being like, we got a stage manager, he'll tell you when it's your time to say your line, they're just like, well, if you can't figure it out, you're fucked. Have fun. And I'm just like, why does no one want to help me? So the teach telepathy thing, I don't want to join a neurotypical telepathic world. I want those neurotypical people who act like anyone who doesn't communicate exactly like them is a demon. I want those people to communicate more directly, because everyone else who can't is still on the outside of that. I think having nonsense environments is actually the concern. And we're using telepathy to just kind of avoid saying, these people aren't acting. They're acting in a completely insular way, which isolates people who are slightly different. And I don't want to just join their social club where they act that way, because I don't think it's right to act that way. I want them to change that behavior. At page 130, I have this mentioned. He's mentioned subtly a few times, but the idea that a person has just suddenly erupted with no discernible cause, and that is caused to invalidate them, is so bad and common. Basically, autistic people are in a position where something's stressing them out over a long time, and they're communicating that this is affecting me in a big way over a long span of time. And they're still being met with, I'm sorry, your feelings are simply uncaused. There's no way for us to help because nothing caused this to happen. So it's just for you to kind of self-regulate and go away. And there's so much of that in this. There's so much of the contradiction that the person sees an autistic behavior and then chooses to not understand it that way. right? So they say, if you miss a social cue and they want to retaliate against you, they're saying, he missed a social cue. But what they're also saying is, he did not miss a social cue. He saw the social cue and he walked right by it on purpose. And that's different from not knowing the social cue was there, right? So the problem when they're retaliating is that they're saying, when you missed that social cue, I know that you didn't miss that social cue. You knew it was there and you did it anyways to mess with me. That's autism denial. That's saying you did not miss that social cue. You saw it was there and you walked right past it anyway. That's not what's happening, right? And so this communication also, or this contradiction also comes up in this way in chapter 6, where these people are repeatedly communicating that something is building the stress inside them and they need help resolving this. And the people around them are just saying, nope, not helping. I will not even acknowledge that that is what caused your feeling. I'm just going to deny flatly. So they're seeing an emotion, they're seeing a stress, and they're saying, no, you're not stressed out. What you're doing is lying about being stressed to manipulate me, which is autism denial again, right? It's saying, no, you don't have stress that builds over time. You're just lying about that. You're just lying. So he's not, in Uniquely Human, he's not super explicit about it, but it is very, there's so much autism denial. When you discuss what you need help with people like are being described in this book, they do these things which appear openly contradictory, and they do them with the goal of punishing you out of asking for what you wanted or hurting you for asking for it.